when discussing this issue of no salvation outside the church, or when being around those who unbelievers or Protestant Christians or anybody who's outside the church, outside the Catholic Church, we're not real. I mean, is our attitude to beat them over the head with this doctrine? Are we to sort of have a arrogance and kind of like, obviously not. Obviously not going to be like, hey, we're the true faith, and we're better than you, and look at you. You need whatever. This is sort of like an attitude. This is kind of an arrogant, prideful attitude, because we do have the truth. We do have the faith. We do have the true church, and we're members of it. But aren't we supposed to treat them as this? I mean, that's the classic question. Aren't we supposed to behave this way? So isn't it kind of rude, basically to tell them that their faith is not the right faith, or that their faith is a false faith? Is it rude or unloving to do something like that? That's kind of the attitude. I think that's kind of the gist of the question that Bishop Hay is addressing. And of course, Bishop Hay says, look, yes, it's a praiseworthy thing, and it's a good thing to be gentle and mild to those who are outside the faith, okay? But we can't compromise the truths of this doctrine just so that we can have a good, cordial relationship with those who are outside the church. Obviously, we're not going to browbeat them, okay? But we have to not compromise the truth that there's no salvation outside the Catholic Church, and they need to know that. That needs to be made aware, So that's kind of what Bishop Hay says. He says, in answer to the questions, look, most undoubtedly, it's a good thing to have this indulgence toward them and a gentle mildness toward them and so forth. He said it's laudable, but he said, but a strict duty to do so, so far as truth can go. All right, so long as we don't compromise on the truth that there is no salvation outside the Catholic Church, as long as that is maintained, we can say it in how we present that case, but we shouldn't compromise that. Obviously, he said, but to betray the truth with any view of this kind must be a grievous crime, right, and highly prejudicial to both parties. It says, in fact, experience shows that the loose way of thinking and speaking, what he means by the loose way of thinking and speaking is basically a laxity toward this faith, basically a kind of shoving it to the side, really not emphasizing it, basically implying that their faiths are good, that their religion is good, and that they're fine where they're at. Basically Vatican II. That this loose way of thinking, which some who are members of the true church have of late got into, which I think is always find interesting, because Bishop Hay's writing in the early 1800s. So this has been certainly an issue for a few hundred years. He says, is productive of the worst consequences, both to whom they wish to favor and to themselves. So when we have this kind of lax attitude, it harms it doesn't just harm the individual who we want to share the truth with, or the friend or the coworker or the whatever that's outside the church. It harms ourselves as well. And Bishop Hay is going to get into that. So he says, the first thing is that it lulls to sleep the people that you wish to bring into the truth, to bring into the faith. Because if they see that that our doctrine on outside the church no salvation is confusing or not clear, or just really not emphasized, then it's not going to be. Then they're going to just not be interested. They're not going to see a motive for really joining the church, or at least a pressure to think about it and to search it. This is what Bishop Hay says. He says, for one, why it's an issue for both us and them if we have a lax attitude about this doctrine. He says, for one, those who are separated from the Church of Christ well know that she constantly professes as an article of her creed that without the true faith and out of her communion, there is no salvation. Well, yes, not, well, this is true then, baby. But those who look at the Novus Ordo know full well that they do not believe that you're outside the church, there's no salvation. In fact, they're very clear that they embrace all religions and that everyone can go to heaven no matter what. I almost, in interacting with Protestants online and so forth, that some of the more hardline Protestants know that that's what they taught, that the Catholic Church taught there's no salvation outside the church, and that Protestants were anathematized by Trent and all this. But I heard William Lane Craig address a question from an audience member, I think it was, and I don't exactly remember the question, but it went something like, "Hey, how do you feel that Catholics view you as outside the church and not on the way to heaven?" It was something of that nature, and he made a very telling statement. He said, I don't think they view that way anymore. They may have, but I think their attitude has changed. I think they see me as a separated brother, and on the road to heaven. They said they may have looked at it that way before, but they don't see it that way anymore. Well, he's very true. It's true. The Novus Ordo doesn't see it that way anymore. In fact, this is how you know the Novus Ordo is false, because it was Bishop Hay says that the church has constantly professed this truth. Constantly professes that outside the true faith and outside her communion, there's no salvation, and that this is a constant teaching. So much so that it was known among unbelievers that that's what the church teaches. Well, they don't teach that anymore in the counterfeit. In the counterfeit, all religions are good. All religions, all roads lead to heaven. Okay, in the Novus Ordo. That's just a side note. So he says that. So these people, keep in mind Bishop Hayes writing for his time, but it's important for us too. He says that people know that the church teaches this doctrine. So when therefore they see the members of the church talking dubiously on this head, seeming to call in question, and even alleging pretexts and excuses to invalidate it, what can they think? If they hear this confusion and this debate among Catholics that maybe they can be saved outside the church, or maybe they're fine. What can they think? He says. So what effect must this have on their minds when they see the members of the true church debating the issue of whether or not they can be saved outside the true church, when they know that's what the teaching is? Right? He says, must it not unavoidably lead them to lull them to sleep? To extinguish any desire of inquiring after the truth, which God may have given them, or to shut their hearts against any such good thought. So this is what Bishop Hay is saying, is that when these people hear, it's just subconsciously, they're listening to it, they're just aware that there's this debate, or they ask these questions like, hey, do I need to join the Catholic Church to be saved? No, you're fine where you're at. Oh, you don't need to be a Catholic to be saved. Oh, you can be saved in your religion, whatever. And they hear subconsciously hearing these things talked, or just, in passing, then what Bishop Hay is saying it does is that it naturally extinguishes maybe a desire to maybe really seek the church. Because if they say, well, I'm fine where I'm at, what need do I need to join the church and give up what I might have to give up to be a Catholic? That's a lot to give. For some people, it's a lot to give up. Maybe Protestant ministers, it might be a lot for them to give up. They have to give up their livelihood. They got to find there's a lot to give up. So if I'm fine where I'm at, it's just another preference. If the Catholic Church is another preference, then why would I think about giving up so much to find it? When I'm fine where I'm at. If the Catholic Church might be fine, might be wonderful, and maybe later on in life I might join it when I finish up what I'm doing here. But I don't need to give up all to find this pearl, the great price right now, because I'm fine where I'm at. You know, it lures them to sleep. And if they would have been told that no, that outside the Catholic Church there's no salvation, you cannot be saved believing and dying as a heretic, you need to join Christ's true church. It might motivate them to seek it more. Say, oh, am I in the true church? You know, as a Presbyterian or as a Baptist, am I in the true church? Who is this guy to say that I'm not in the true church? Maybe he has some points. You know, it might spark something in their mind to truly seek the truth. But if you just say, oh, you're good where you're at, well, then it's like, just go to sleep. Go to sleep. Oh, I'm fine where I'm at. Okay. And it's just because, and as Bishop Hay says, he says, self-love never fails to eagerly to lay hold of everything that favors its wishes. You know, so we are motivated by self-love. We're motivated by it. So when we hear something that appeals to us and that will allow us alleviate any kind of suffering on our behalf, we're willing to follow that. So if we were anywhere motivated to seek the true church and to give up all to find it and incur the suffering that may come with it, if we can grasp onto any kind of hope that we can be saved outside the true church, that we might embrace that Protestant or that whatever might embrace it and be like, oh, okay, well, if this is a debatable issue, then, you know, I'm not going to take the risk of giving up all. I mean, that's a lot for me to give up for something that's a debate. So, right? That's what he says. He says, self-love never fails to eagerly seek the thing that will give us the least amount of suffering. And our self-love is opposed to penance and suffering and all these things. So we have to crush down this self-love. So, and that's part of our fallen nature. So when anybody hears, so when Bishop Hay is saying, like, if you start teaching this truth, or diminishing this truth, it's going to affect. It's going to crush. It's going to kill the flame of these individuals who are truly seeking the truth. If you even care about that, you know. But that's what it's going to do. So he says, self-love never fails eagerly to lay hold of everything that favors its wishes. And if once they find this truth called in question, even by those who profess to believe it, they will consider it a mere school dispute and think no more of the matter. Well, you just killed any chance of these people saving their souls. Because they're at fault too, of course. But because they're looking for an excuse, and you just gave it to them by calling this truth into doubt.